And coming up on today's show, rail fares go up by 4.9%, sparking fury amongst passenger groups. Has the time come to reconsider the balance between fares and subsidy? Rail Minister Huw Merriman and Drivers' Union ASLEF are at loggerheads again, and a resolution seems as far away as ever. Richard has been out and about on Great Western, and we have some great new behind-the-scenes videos to look forward to. And HS2 Limited delivers 1 million tonnes of construction material, by train, of course. Hello, and welcome to Green Signals, your railway podcast from me, Nigel Harris, and
from me, Richard Bowker.
And here we go again, Richard, talking trains. It's great, isn't it? If you're enjoying Green Signals, please give the episode a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube, and please hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it does help us to grow the show and do lots more of what you seem to want and enjoy. And we continue to really appreciate your very kind comments. Well, nearly always kind comments. We get so many, we can't read them all out, but this one really was very special to us. At Miles and Chains said, "Excellent and informative listening as always. I genuinely believe if more people watch these podcasts, we will be in a far better place. You all do an amazing job of explaining the issues. Keep up the great work. Looking forward to tomorrow's episode." Well, thanks ever so much for that. The three of us really do appreciate it. Okay, now, on to this week's news, and we're going to really focus on one big story today, and that's that fares go up again. On March 4th, rail fares went up once again with a hike of only 4.9% in England and Wales, in line with average earnings growth. Incidentally, the rise in Scotland was 8.7%, which is probably due a story in itself, but both are higher than the rate of inflation. The story generated the usual froth of fury. That's a good bit of alliteration there, froth of fury. With plenty of commentators demanding the immediate return of the railways to public ownership, as if this was some sort of magic wand cure. This ignores, whether deliberately or through ignorance, the inconvenient truth that decisions on fares are really in the hands of the government now and have been for quite some time. You spent some time having a look at some numbers, Richard, bringing out the accountant in you again. What did you find?
Oh, it's not buried very deep, the accountant.
Okay, it would be for me. It would be for me, Richard.
Fair enough. Well, I did have a look because, the fares story is one thing, but you kind of ask yourself the question, well, what's behind it? Why? Why is this needing to be done? And I did discover some numbers, and we'll stick a link on the website for this because it's really interesting. And I promise, not just to accountants, it's actually really interesting. So I found there's a document from the ORR, the Office of Rail Regulation, and it's called the Rail Industry Finances Report. And they do it like an annual digest that they do each year, and it's actually written very accessibly, really. And the figures, the latest report is actually for the figures up to March 2023. So that's kind of a year, already almost a year out of date. But I think it's worth looking at them because, hopefully the last 12 months has actually improved, if anything, but as ridership's grown again. But so we look at the numbers up to 2023. And it is worth saying the numbers do include the Elizabeth line. And as we know, that's actually generated quite a lot of change in the market.
Britain's busiest railway, I understand.
It's extraordinary, isn't it, actually? Have you've been on it, I presume?
Yeah, from a cold start to become Britain. I think it's responsible for something like 6% of all passenger carrying.
It is absolutely fantastic. And as I will explain in a minute, it's actually generated real modal shift.
Oh, right, okay.
People coming onto the railway that hadn't before. So that's really good. But anyway, here's some interesting numbers. Right? In the year ended March 23, the government contributed £21.1 billion to the railway. Right? Yeah, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
It is
but
a lot of money.
Let's just break it down a bit and work out where the money went to.
Good.
So 11.9 billion, so just over half of it, was for the operational railway, the day-to-day railway.
So that's what we would know as subsidy then.
Yeah, kind of. That's
half of the Bowker equation.
yes, with the rest coming from fares. No, fair comment. And actually, that was a reduction on the previous year when it was 14.6. But there you see a benefit of people coming back after the pandemic, right? 6.9 billion was for HS2.
Okay.
2 billion was for infrastructure enhancements. And there's quite a lot. So there was 600 million for TransPennine. There was 200 million for East West Rail Phase 2, and so on and so forth. So there was a chunk of money for specific enhancements.
So is that direct grant to Network Rail?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it effectively has that.
It's outside the regulatory settlement, in other words.
It is specifically for enhancements that the government's chosen to do. There was then 300 million for what they call miscellaneous, which is a big number for something that's miscellaneous, but it does its important stuff, like the cost of running the British Transport Police, the cost of running Transport Focus. There's quite a lot of other bits and bobs. It's a bit of a bucket, you know. So when you add all that up together, 21.9, but just over half of it is for the operational railway, and nearly 7 billion of it is for HS2. So big number. Now, passengers contributed 9.2 billion.
Okay.
Right, so that's your point about the other half.
That's the other half of the Bowker equation.
Yeah. From 1.4 billion passenger journeys in that year, which was down from pre-pandemic when it kind of got to 1.7. So at the end of March 23, we were still only 80% of where we were pre-pandemic.
It's a very stubborn number, is that? In it recovered to 80%, and then
that was March 23. It'd be interesting to see where it's got to now. But interestingly, and it's the point we made about the Elizabeth line. If you take the Elizabeth line out, it's actually only 73.6% of where it was pre-pandemic. So the Elizabeth line is actually a really good news story. And in fact, TfL have estimated that around 30% of the journeys on the Elizabeth line are what are called generative. They're new. They've come about because they built that railway, which is great.
We've built it and they have come.
We've built it and they have come. Right. So that's where the money came from the railway. When you look at where the money goes out from the railway, the operational costs were about 21.1 billion. So actually, you can see that the kind of thing sort of broadly balances out. So that's why you need, if you've only got 9.2 from passengers, you need about 11.9 from the government. That is, as you say, that's Bowker's law, really. There's only two sources of money, really, in
subsidy and fares.
Yeah. But here's a really interesting little nugget that's stored away. Of the 21.1 billion that the industry needs to function, 4 billion of it is actually Network Rail financing costs, right? And that's actually a big increase from the previous year. The final stat, which is very interesting, is then you say to yourself, well, okay, given that we know the money only comes from the government and it only comes from the passenger, what's their balance? And the balance was at the end of March 23, in the whole of Great Britain was 53%. In other words, the government contributed 53% of the cost of the operational railway. I'm not including those enhancements.
I get
right?
It.
So 53% the operational railway. Here's something really interesting. In England, it's 50%. In Scotland, it's 70%, right? So the government contributes 70%. But when you equalise it all out, it comes to 53%. And here's the problem with the Treasury. In the year before the pandemic, it was 32.2%. So the government are now subsidising the operational railway considerably more than they were before. And is that, we wonder, the reason why we need a fares increase? Here's an interesting question, right? So given that as the context, let me just throw another amazing stat at you, because everybody goes, oh my goodness, that is a lot of money. And your reaction was 21.1 billion is a lot of money.
Well,
in the same year, it is. And we're not being flippant, right? It is. In the same year, up to the end of March 23, the NHS received £180 billion. Okay.
That
Now,
does set it in context, doesn't it?
well, yeah, already there are people going, oh, he's trying to say that you should spend less on the NHS.
No.
I'm absolutely not, just for the avoidance of doubt, right? But the general kind of narrative is it's chronically underfunded. Now, I'm not getting into whether
the NHS,
yeah. Now that's a different podcast. That probably for people who understand how the NHS works, but it's £180 billion. And my argument's always been that as important as the NHS is, the railway is vital to the society and the economy. So is it unreasonable that it consumes the amount of public subsidy? And you could argue, no, it's not. I mean,
well, we're calling it subsidy, Richard. Maybe we should be calling it investment.
I think somebody said that, didn't they?
It's a frequent thing. We talk about investment in roads and subsidy in railways, and there we are doing exactly the same. Because it is subsidy, but it does set the mind off in unhelpful directions with regard to some of the arguments.
It does. I think the reason why it doesn't get called investment is investment sort of has that sense of capital that's sort of to generate future income streams, whereas somebody's paying for the operational costs of the day to day. So I kind of get why.
But it's an investment in that we get the return on the social benefits, and everything else that we know that a railway does socially and economically for any area.
Yeah.
So maybe we should just start calling it investment, because it is. The return comes in non-fiscal ways for the railway, but in very solid economic way. And of course, Peter Hendy has been making this speech for at least a decade now, about the benefits of having a railway, and he's doing it again with regard to the celebrations for Rail 200 next year to reiterate the benefits of what a railway does, because it's too easy to overlook that, especially when we call it subsidy, I'm suddenly thinking. But there you go.
But you're right. But can you imagine, right? It's 1.4 billion passenger journeys. Now, those passenger journeys are very different passenger journeys. I think the average distance is actually relatively short, actually. But there's huge numbers of long distance journeys. Can you imagine a world where those 1.4 billion, even 100 million or 200 million decided not to be on the railway anymore? They'd go. I mean, it doesn't work.
The roads would clog up, and that's another reason why I was disappointed to hear Huw Merriman at the Bradshaw address use that dreadful trope about to invest in railways is unfair to taxpayers who don't use trains. That's absolute claptrap, because every motorist benefits from having the road clear in front of his bonnet, doesn't it? There's a whole range of it, but to hear the rail minister saying that, I thought was really disappointing.
I think claptrap's a perfectly fair word. It is claptrap, because the economy benefits and society benefits from the contribution that rail makes to transportation, and really to suggest otherwise is really sort of playing to the gallery.
Well, you put your finger right on it. What we're seeing is the equivalent to what we see Trump doing all the time, and we're seeing more of it now from Jeremy Hunt and everybody else, and it's playing to their base.
There's that great film which my kids love. The Johnny English films with Rowan Atkinson. Yeah, and the second one has got just at the beginning where he's training to be a sort of a Tibetan monk or something, and there's a great line that says, "With great age comes great wisdom," or something like that. Right? I don't know whether that applies personally, right? But I'm starting to change kind of my perspective on some of these things, and the reason is this: because despite what we've just said about how important the railway is, we know at the moment there is a gap. We're not back to where we were.
£2 billion a year, they reckon, is the received, accepted kind of number you hear most of the time, isn't it? A £2 billion gap.
Yeah, well, it's that gap, isn't it, between 32% and 50% or whatever it is in terms of the taxpayer contribution of the railway. But what I find interesting is that the accepted narrative within the industry, and actually by a lot of the very seasoned commentators who look at it, goes something like this: we should actually be grateful for the continued level of support the government provide. The rail industry finances are in a terrible state, and we must be working much harder to balance the books. And those two statements are a bit they feel a bit captured to me. And I wonder whether actually, particularly with the climate emergency, particularly with the fact that our road space is getting consumed. I mean, the number of cars on the road compared to, say, when I was at the SRA 20 years ago is just like phenomenal increase. Surely it's not unreasonable to say, hang on a minute, maybe the balance is we can't go back to where it was before. We do need to commit more resource to the railway, which is, I never thought I'd hear myself say that, but actually I'm starting to believe it.
Well, I can remember writing comment pieces after talking to Alistair Darling about driverless cars. And he said in several speeches that there was no way to control 24 million cars on the road. Well, the number now is way ahead of that, isn't it?
Way ahead of that, yeah. But here's the problem, right? We are in danger of being quite naive, or being accused of being quite naive. Because yes, you could on the one hand say, of course the railway should get more cash. It does do a great job. Here's the problem. Right now, the railway's not doing a great job.
No, it isn't.
And you can understand why. I mean, you said at the head of the show, passenger groups sort of reacted with fury about it. And you can understand that they're being asked to pay more and more for less and less. And that is a problem.
And given how unreliable the railway is, we've already got that problem, which you and I have talked about quite a bit on here. The erosion and, if not destruction, of public trust in the quality of service and the reliability of the railway. And now you're going to pay 5% more for it. Well, that's not going to fly.
Well, it's certainly not going to fly and be accepted, with gratitude, and we've seen that already. But there's another series of problems. Should we talk about fiscal rules?
Is that something you use for measuring things, Richard?
Well, I don't know. Maybe you can get a cream for it. I'm not so sure. But fiscal rules are
ointment.
It's what the government right now, as we are recording this, the day before the budget. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, is very, very concerned about fiscal rules. So basically, fiscal rules is its simplest is the government doesn't ever want to be in a position where borrowing is more than a certain percentage of GDP, right? And it's kind of designed to prevent chancellors being profligate and doing daft things like, heaven forbid, borrowing money to fund tax cuts. Right? So
that would be daft.
Well, I mean,
that's what did for Liz Truss, wasn't it? One of many things.
Quite well. I'm glad you said that. But the fiscal rules, whether you believe them or not, that they are what they are, right? And Jeremy Hunt definitely believes he's concerned by them. Let's just say, for argument's sake, they are what they are, right? Everybody's got to worry about them. They are a real constraint. So if you believe at the moment that, and we'll talk about the budget hopefully next week, but all the rumours are that the Chancellor's trying to find some headroom to give us some tax cuts, right?
They're obsessed with it, aren't
they? The rumours are he's looking for around 2p, and it'll either be 2p off national insurance. The slight problem with that is it doesn't really help people who've retired for obvious reasons, or income tax, and maybe it's a penny off both. Who knows? I mean, there's lots of rumours circulating, but it will need quite a chunk of cash to be able to do it, and he doesn't have a lot of headroom to be able to stay within these fiscal rules. So he's got to do something about that to create more headroom to give the tax cut. And one of the suggestions is that future public expenditure commitments, the envelope that allows people to plan and think about what future public expenditure is going to be, which I believe is currently forecast to rise about 1% in real terms, i.e. 1% above the rate of inflation. That could actually be clawed back. Well, that's a real problem because there's a lot of councils and local authorities saying, we're already stuffed at 1%, right?
Well, Birmingham and Nottingham are effectively bankrupt, aren't they? News is full of it at the moment.
But none of it's good news for people like the railway saying, could we have, doing the old sort of Oliver Twist thing, saying, could we have some more, please? So the fiscal environment is pretty tough.
Not conducive.
And we'll know more about it in 24 hours, or by the time people are listening to this, we'll already know about it. There is another problem, though. And the other problem...
There's cheerful stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Do you like that? Do you like Clarkson's Farm?
Oh, absolutely.
My kids, one of my kids calls me Cheerful Charlie.
It is, right, yes, the land agent. I mean, what brilliant telly it is.
It is brilliant. It's brilliant. I do actually... I do identify with him, actually.
Well, he's quite good in that, because he's not the arrogant gob, is he? He's been put in his place by a 20-something Caleb who rips him off regularly about driving tractors into telegraph poles or whatever.
He's very good. The real problem, I think, for the railway sector, if you like, is we would probably like to have a greater share of government contribution. I mean, the 32% of pre-pandemic, which is currently now around 50% of government contribution. There's two major impediments at that moment. One is performance, and the other is stuff's costing too much. And I genuinely think, and I don't know if you agree with this, I think until the industry as a whole cracks those two things,
no chance.
And it's not helped by the fact that the Department for Transport, I've kind of got their fingerprints all over both of those.
And sorry, when I said no chance, I mean there's no chance of any more until we do that. Because
I would agree.
The Treasury just will not listen and doesn't trust the railway, and never has.
Yeah, and that's not entirely unreasonable. I mean, if you're the Treasury, you kind of go, you almost got the same line, really. I'm getting less and less for more, and it's costing me more and more. Or how does that work?
There's a real argument that the Treasury never got over the 1955 modernisation plan, when however many billions at today's value was swilled against the wall, and it's just seen the railway ever since as being guilty of a similar sort of approach.
Yep. I mean, I'm sure that's right. I'll take your word for it. I wasn't around, but
neither was I. Richard, I wasn't around for the Battle of Hastings, but I know it happened.
Good recovery, fair point. So what can the railway industry do? How many times have we said this on this podcast? Performance remains the key. Do you know those numbers that we were talking about earlier in that financial report from the ORR? There's one number that kind of absolutely smacked me between the eyes. That in the year ended March 23,
I know what's coming here. Yeah,
the total number of trains cancelled on Britain's railways was, wait for it, 450,000.
That's just
1,000, nearly 500,000. Right, that's an awful lot of very unhappy passengers.
Well, it is when you consider that there's something like 20,000 odd trains a day. Even my maths works out. What that means. It's just appalling.
Yeah, it's about 17 days, or whatever the number is. I've probably got that wrong, but it's absolutely extraordinary, right? I sort of reflected the other day when we were thinking about this on the conversation we had with Andrew Haynes, which we all agree was great, and he was terrific. The one bit that is still troubling me, he said that he felt the reason why performance was poor at the moment, one of the big reasons, was what he described as the contractual matrix. Well, my real concern is the current rail reform bill going through pre-legislative scrutiny has just a different form of contractual matrix. And I'm not sure it is about the contractual matrix. I think it's about people standing up and saying, no, we're going to run this better, almost despite what the contracts say and despite what the incentive issues are. We've got to sort this out. But performance is the key. I don't think there's any chance of improving the perception with anybody unless that.
Well, it's leadership, isn't it? It's what the old Black Macs used to do, which is rouse people up and get them to do the right thing, to make a difference. And it's got to be done every day, isn't it? You've got to have your foot to the floor on all those issues every day and make it work.
Yeah, agreed. And we talked also on the podcast with Andrew about a directing or a guiding mind.
Directing mind.
And I think it is a directing mind. And I don't think there's any conflict between a directing mind and empowering professional people to do a great job and know what be professional.
Well, everybody's got a field of play, haven't they? There are rules, there are boundaries to our areas of activity. Steph and I, when we were on rail, we had the audience that we knew to cater for, and that was a field of play. But within that, we had total empowerment to do what we wanted. And we evolved our strategy and we did it. So, I mean, it's entirely compatible with having a contractual matrix, but saying within that you are empowered to do this, 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 and this. That one I've quoted before from, Ed Burkhardt said, find really good people and then get out the way.
And John Armitt used to say, you are empowered within a framework. Right?
Yeah.
I'll set the framework and then you're empowered within it. That's kind of leadership, really. So,
I mean, do you think there's a kind of malaise there? It's always going to be like this, and not really getting the shoulders to the wheel, or I'm not quite sure how to word it, but is there sort of an acceptance that the contractual matrix means that you can't make a difference, so there's no point trying? I don't know. Is there something?
No,
in that?
I think that's I don't know. I think there's some fabulous people in this industry, and I think they're probably weary and feel somewhat embattled. And I suspect there's a bit of cynicism. Yeah, okay, we've got a rail reform bill. We really believe that the DfT is going to be sort of.
So it needs exciting and inspirational leadership.
Yeah.
And we've a few people in the industry who do that. Andrew does it. John Smith at GB Rail Freight does it. Maggie Simpson does it at the Rail Freight Group. We all know who these people are who stand up, speak with passion and belief and commitment and excitement, and make you think, I want to be part of that.
I think we're at the point where this group of people, and all those people you just mentioned, just need to make some decisions, do some things, and then ask for forgiveness, not permission.
JFDI.
Right? There is another problem, though. So this performance issue is absolutely critical. The other one is the cost issue. And I have to be honest that, as you know, I'm very calm. I don't get flustered about anything. I don't, sort of rant. No, you're confusing me with someone else.
No, I'm not.
You are, clearly. I was looking at Haxby Station. I mean, we should be happy. We should be happy because the Prime Minister did at least go and have a look at where it's going to be. So I suppose he's had some exposure to the railway. So I suppose
you mean he's been and had a look at the hole we're about to shovel a load of money into?
Well, there's the point, right? So Haxby Station, for those who don't know, Haxby is a village, a settlement. It's not really a village, actually. It's a town of about 8,500 people, just north of York on the Scarborough line, it'll be, won't it? And it's going to get a new station at a cost of £24 million. And I just happened to, I was just like, 24 million quid. I just happened to have a look at the press release on the website, and I absolutely stopped in my tracks. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can now see a picture, an artist's impression of Haxby Station. If you're listening to us on the podcast, don't worry. Go to our website, greensignals.org, and there's some extra material, and you can see the same thing there, right? So you won't miss out. And if you can, here's a quiz question, right? Tell me what it is about that artist's impression that justifies £24 million. It's 2 platforms. There's no station building that I can see of any material. There's a couple of kind of fancy bus shelters, a very large car park. There's 2 lift shafts and an overbridge for accessible access, right? I'm right. Mini explosion moment. That is not £24 million. If you think that is a reasonable price, if you're a cost consultant, you're a quantity surveyor, you're a project manager, you're a train operator, you're an engineer network rail, if you think that is a valid number for that station, you're in the wrong business, because it's not.
But, I mean, remember Soham, 1 platform, 1 bus shelter, 1 car park, started off at 18 million. I think that crept over 20, didn't it? Yeah. And there's an example you gave on the Barks and Hants a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, but I mean, at least that was 125 mile an hour railway. This is. I mean, I don't wish to be disrespectful to Haxby. It's a lovely place, but it's a small country station on a main line, but it's not that. It's 24 million. It just is not.
So maybe we need to do this in a future program, because I agree with you totally. I mean, what is a station? What is a platform? A couple of walls, some infill and some tarmac, a bus shelter and a car park. This is not. We're not building the 4th bridge here.
I tell you what. I mean, always be careful what you wish for. Really, I would love to sit down with whoever it is that has built up that cost estimate.
Go through it line by line with them.
And by the way, if it's you and you're listening, when I say go through it line by line, trust me, I mean line by line.
Well, there's an invitation. So if anybody who's involved wants to take Richard up on that, we would be delighted. And actually, if it's you and you think it is 24 million, then come and justify it.
If it is that, if that is the new price for railway stations in Great Britain, we ain't building that many more of them.
No, we're not.
And we're not doing, and we're playing into the hands of those. We started all this with fares, right, and fiscal rules and all the rest of it. But we're playing into that the hands of the ones who go, it's just too expensive. And at that price, I agree.
It is.
I just don't agree that's the price.
Well, let's hope that somebody comes and takes you up on your offer, Richard.
Roger Ford, Roger's a mate of both of ours.
He
right?
is, dear old Rog.
And he describes it as the L'Oreal Railway.
That's really funny.
I'm not going to flick my hair, but it's because we're worth it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
We're not worth it.
Not at 24 million quid, we're not.
We're not entitled to it, right? I think there's probably some people in the industry think, oh, well, we need a railway because we're going to hit the net zero target, so they'll just give us the money. No, at some point, someone's going to say enough.
We've reached that point, Richard. We've reached that point with this Prime Minister. Yeah. He has said, no, we're not doing it. We're not doing HS2 North. We're not,
So the message for me is we can't, as a railway industry, you can't change you can't change things that are not in your control. You can try and convince other people to change those things, but you can't. What we can change that's in our control is performance and a mindset and attitude to how much stuff costs. Those things we can change.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. And again, anybody watching who's got some views or information or who is in a position to change that should get in touch because we genuinely want to understand it, don't we?
Indeed.
And if it is proved to us that a station like that costs 24 million, then we look forward to seeing that argument. Right. Let us, as you say, move on. Rail Minister Huw Merriman was at the Transport Select Committee recently, again, talking about the drivers' dispute. And once again, he's incurred the wrath of ASLEF. This time, it's his comments about driver managers driving trains during disputes and being paid £500 per shift for doing so. You're not convinced this is a sensible thing to be doing, are you, Richard?
Well, I certainly don't think it was sensible or smart to be pushing the point in the way he did at the time he did. Driver standards managers, what do we used to call them?
Footplate inspectors or traction inspectors?
Traction inspectors. I knew it was there. Driver standards managers. I mean, it's a specific job in their own right. They are different to drivers. They're there to support.
They're former drivers, usually, the best of the best. In steam days, they were characterised by their bowler hats that they wore.
Right. But there has to be an element of separation between what they do and drivers. Both are very, very important roles. We know that. And there has to be mutual respect between them. And generally there is. And I mean, I was out on Great Western recently with a driver standards manager and drivers, and it was very, very healthy and had a great relationship, but you could tell that one was doing one job and one was doing another. Now, a driver standards manager has to keep their own competency up in terms of driving, so they will have to drive from time to time.
Well, they can't coach and advise otherwise, can they?
No, and in emergencies, it's very handy that they obviously can drive. But what Huw Merriman claimed, I think, was that there is an agreement on LNER for driver managers to drive on LER on a regular basis. I think, wouldn't it be helpful if I've been said of Anti-West Coast, actually, wouldn't it be helpful if they did that? But certainly said, look, on LNER, they drive on a regular basis. ASLEF's retort was that there's no such formal agreement between the union and any train company. And again, the temperature got raised, right, instead of reducing it.
As were the stakes by inevitable consequence.
Yeah, it's just like we're trying to kind of calm this down, not kind of wind it up. Elder statesman, he'll hate me for saying
I know
that,
he will. That's you.
Yeah, but Graham Eccles. He actually, but let's face it, he knows a thing or two about
Oh, yeah.
operations.
In fact, Graham's forgotten more about operations than the rest of us are likely to ever know.
Well, that is true. But he also knows a great deal about managing people.
Yeah.
And he said in a tweet, he said, "Would I have risked creating a tension capable of threatening the bond of trust and respect between two of the key safety roles in the industry to run a handful of extra trains? Question mark. Not in 100 years." And I think that was
So he's
that was
talking
kind
about winding up tensions between drivers and inspectors or traction managers.
yeah.
Yes,
And I think that was pretty much my reaction too.
Yeah.
Should we have
happier moment? Let's
have a happier moment? Are you sat down?
I am.
Are you holding on to your chair?
I'm holding on to my Cuneo mug because I haven't got a green signals one yet. We're still waiting their appearance. Oh, you smart horse.
So I am right. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you will see that I'm holding up a green signals mug to the camera. If you're listening to it on audio, again, look on our website and we'll put a picture of our green signals mug.
Indeed.
But the good news is
they finally come.
They're finally here. Apparently, it was a big. I don't know if you can see that. It's all green on the inside. See?
And the handle seems to be green as well.
And the handle's got and that's what caused the issue. Anyway, I've got to say they're really, really nice.
They look nice, yeah. I look forward to my parcel, Richard. And Steph will be doing as well, no doubt at all.
Oh, we're talking about the mugs? Oh,
yeah.
Right, okay, yeah, no, that's fine. Anyway, we're on to the quiz because we now have mugs. Last week's question was this. Who apparently said, "I will be in my grave before that F gets his logo on my trains"? And the answer, of course, was John Wellesby, who was said to have made that comment about Richard Branson following a meeting, which I guess must have been pre-privatisation, a story that Richard Branson recounts in his autobiography, Losing My Virginity. Anyway, apparently, I think I've got this right. The phone intercom was left on, and as Richard was leaving, he heard Wellesby say it. So,
what, on the intercom to his PA or something?
Something like that.
That must have been a moment.
Yeah, well, probably more of a moment for John Wellesby when he found out. Anyway, that is who is apparently said that. That's where the quote comes from. Well done to LNER driver Ross Clark, who was first in with the right answer.
An old mate of ours is Ross, a good man,
indeed. Regular
social media tweeter, all-round good egg.
And a big Star Trek fan.
He absolutely is, as his Twitter handle makes clear.
Indeed. Well, Ross, we'll be in touch soon to find out where you would like your green signals mug sent. Although sadly, it will not clearly be by transporter beam. It might have to go via the Royal Mail.
You'll be delighted to know, Richard, I am not going to attempt to make the noise of a transporter.
We are all truly blessed.
I did try, but it just wasn't having it, and I thought, no, that's never going to
work. As I say, truly blessed. So this week's question, probably the last in a while, actually, our little mini series of railway quotes, but it's quite interesting.
It's a good one. I like this one.
Who said this? Accidents do not happen by accident. I'll say that again. Who said accidents do not happen by accident?
And in what context?
Oh, it's a two-parter, is it?
Well,
you're changing the rules as we go along. Okay, right. Well, that's fine. I suppose that's fair enough.
If it's going to be from what the hell I like.
ooh, fighting talk. Oh no, that's another podcast, isn't it? Right. Anyway, if you think you know, usual thing, let us know by Twitter or X, whatever it is, or YouTube comment or email, whatever. First to win the two-parter, the quote and the context, we'll get a mug.
And the thing is, if you know the answer to that, you will know the context and you'd include it in the question.
You would like to think so, that's true.
In your answer, wouldn't you? But I like that one, and I'm sure that our ranks and legions of safety professionals doubtless watching this programme will like that one, because accidents don't happen by accidents. And it was said a long time ago, there's a clue. Right, let us continue the upbeat mood after that big helping of misery earlier that we served up for people. We are delighted to announce that a new series of videos is on the way. Richard has been making good use of his gimbal Eric Morecambe had said, "Don't worry, Richard, they can't touch you for it." Richard's been busy with his gimbal out on the Great Western, and he had a good time. He's been in cabs. He's been all over the show looking at what goes on. Actually, Richard, does this deserve a fanfare? Maybe not. Oh, I did one anyway.
Nothing deserves that, especially not the poor listeners. But anyway.
But there you go. Anyway, Richard's first video is focused on Great Western's Pullman dining service. It's a crappy job, Richard, but I suppose somebody's got to do it. I think you had a great time making it, didn't you?
Oh, certainly did. Certainly did. It was fantastic. Did it with my brother Paul, and we had a wonderful time. When you do these sort of videos, particularly we did Pullman dining, we did some cab rides, we did the St Ives branch, we did the night Riviera, and it's quite intense actually. And so actually having somebody with you to kind of do it with is actually hugely helpful.
A production assistant, as it's known in the
trade. Well, he was a bit more than that. He was actually telling me what to do, really. But we had a great time. We had 48 hours, fantastic time, a lot of fun, hard work. Really was hard work. But the Pullman dining, it was. The Pullman dining video is up now, already on our channel. So please do watch that and like and all the rest of it. And see what you think. Be great, and we've got more. We've got more to come. Big thanks to GWR. Thanks to Mark Hopwood. Thanks to Dan, the head of external communications, who was just absolutely superb. But actually, when you watch the videos, you'll see big thanks to all the staff on the various trains. They were just amazing.
Says the man who got rid of restaurant car dining on East Coast.
No, I think you're confusing me with someone else.
I am not. I remember conversations with you at National Express when you, I nearly said lectured me at length, where you went into great detail about how it was impossible to have the cost of a chef in there serving it and all the rest of it, and it was just as good to have something much less complex served to your seat. And here you are raving about Pullman dining.
I think you're confused. Anyway, like I said
am,
earlier,
maybe, but not about this.
Well, like I said earlier, with great age comes great wisdom. So that's what I'm playing that card now. It's brilliant, right? I was in the video. I do say there's very little of it left. Of course, I think Transport for Wales do it on their Manchester Cardiff service now, actually, and I'm told that's very good as well. But the Great Western Pullman dining is brilliant.
I've done it a couple of times, and you go into the costs of it in the video, and it's not as much as you might think.
Nope.
But seriously, all congratulations to Mark Hopwood for keeping that going with the sort of the linen tablecloth look and the silver service, and I mean, and the quality of the food. It is top restaurant quality food, isn't it? And it wasn't that. I mean, it was brilliant, and I thoroughly enjoyed the nosh. But what impressed me more than anything, and you just alluded to it, was the commitment of the staff and the outright, very obvious pride that they've got in providing a brilliant service. And pride was the word. And if we had a bit more of what they've got right around the railway, railwaymen and women had the time to be able to do that, that would be really good, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, go and try it. Definitely. You won't be disappointed.
We recommend it. So the more people try it, the more Mark's likely to keep it going. I wonder if you change your views on the restaurant. No, we'll not get into that again. So look, let us go into our little closing bit where we highlight some bits and pieces of good news that maybe passed you by. And one press release that caught my eye this week is that HS2 reported that 646 freight trains have now delivered 1 million tonnes of construction materials, 1 million tonnes, to its Quainton railhead near Aylesbury, and doing so eliminated the requirement for fully 100,000 HGV journeys in rural Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire, and West Northamptonshire. And if you needed an example to trot out to your mates in the pub or the line side or anywhere else about how important freight is and what the impact it can have, that's got to be a good example, don't you think, Richard?
Totally. It's fantastic, and it's a real industry effort.
1 million tons. That's really quite something, isn't it? And on that note, that's all we've got time for this week. Thanks ever so much for watching or listening. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you're on YouTube. Leave a comment wherever you happen to be, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to us, and it really does help us a lot. So on that note, I suppose I missed a chance for a humble pie joke about food on trains, didn't I? Never mind. It's goodbye from me, and
I'm so pleased you missed that chance. It's goodbye from me.
Thanks for being with us. See you next time.